Hey guys, Farmer Jesse here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in that box in a second, but first I kind of want to describe how we set up our beds and why the paths are so important to begin with. So let's do it. So the way that we set up our farm is we set it up on a 30-inch bed system for the most part. Most of our plots are in a 30-inch bed system, which means that we have 30-inch growing beds and then 18 to 12-inch pathways, depending on where they are, and also depending on how lazy I was when I made them. You can kind of see behind me, you can see each of these beds is roughly 30 inches, and then there's some mulch in between. I'm actually going to talk about that soon. I'm going to talk about that this week on a vlog. We're going to start just a little vlog, a little weekly kind of roundup of what we've got going on the farm. So look out for that. I'll probably put that up in the next couple days. But anyway, yeah, we did some mulching madness. So most of our paths right now have been mulched with wood chips. But I'm going to talk about that later anyway. But the paths are always where the paths are right now, and the beds are always where the beds are. They're semi-permanent, but they really are permanent. They just stay there. All right, so each of our plots is 50 by 100. So if we have 18-inch beds, that takes up, let's see, let's do some quick math here. 1,950 square feet per plot of just walking space. That's a lot of walking space, and we're trying to tighten up our operation so that we're not doing as much walking, but also so that all of the space that we're actually tending, that we're cultivating, is has a financial value or some sort of value that contributes to the farm and adds value to what we already do. So there's several ways to do this, several ways to sort of make money or make your pathways profitable. And one of my favorite ways was last year I saw that Elliot Seldner's favorite farm, one of my favorite farmers, I'll link to his Instagram below. He actually, their farm, he and his wife, they loaded up their tunnel, their high tunnel, from every square inch. They didn't even have paths, which I thought was really cool. And basically what they did was they just sort of cut it out as they went and harvested, which is really great idea. It's a great use of space. And we could do that a little bit. We may do a little of that in the tunnel in coming months and coming years, just to maximize our small amount of tunnel space, because really we're only at like, let's see if I can do math. Maybe 15,000 square feet under tunnel space. So it's not a lot, it's a fair amount, not even a quarter acre, but we can do that in a few spaces, maybe. You can also, increase your bed size is a really good, way to limit your paths. If you have bigger beds, you have fewer paths, so you could go from a 30-inch bed system to maybe a 60-inch bed system, and then that way you have fewer paths to tend. So that's one option we have, and we already had it set up. We've already had them broad forked. I really didn't want to mess around too much with the bed system. So we put down the mulch, and again, I'll talk about that later. What's in that box is Stropharia rugoso annulata. Nailed it. So known as King Stropharia or wine cap mushroom. It's a mushroom, and it grows really well in shade. And you want to grow it in shade, because if you don't grow it in shade, it doesn't quite get that burgundy, it's also called burgundy. It doesn't get that burgundy cap on it. So we want to put it into our beds, and we put it right here in between these two sweet corn beds, hoping that if we can get a fall flush, it'll come up. Those corn are really tall there in like September, maybe October, depending on how hot it is. People usually sow this mushroom kind of in the spring, and it takes about 8 weeks to get to maturity. So if you're sowing it in the spring, you're usually expecting maybe a harvest by late summer, early autumn. But if you sow it like we did in the summertime, you're maybe expecting mid-autumn to even maybe just the early spring, which would be fine. Either way is fine. But in so doing, we have to think about crops that will shade it all the time, that will always have a good canopy. So always having big transplants going in, so that whenever it starts fruiting, that it'll have plenty of cover. But basically how we set it up is essentially I soak some cardboard, I laid that down over a thin layer of mulch, and then I laid the spawn that we ordered from Field and Forest Products. I'll put their information in the YouTube link. And we laid the cardboard down. We sprinkled a little bit of that spawn right over top, and then we sprinkled some wood chips some non-dyed, non-chemical wood chips right over top of it. And then we took more of that mulch, which is kind of like a bark mulch, like a landscaper's mulch, the stuff that you see around flowers and stuff. We took some of that and put it over top as kind of a cap. So that's gonna help us hold in the moisture. Also just act as like a protectant against the elements for the spawn to actually take to that cardboard, because cardboard's really easy for spawn to take to, but also take to those wood chips. So the goal here is to create a little pathway of wood chips. And we're not gonna walk on it too much. I think that compaction would probably ruin our yields, but I hope to do this to every one of our beds. So you know, the video cuts out a little bit in the middle because my camera got too hot because it's been blazing hot here. Basically you know, you get to see that when I do these other trays. I did these like separate trays, and when I did that, all I did was I took some seeding trays and I filled those with a little bit of the mulch, a bit of the spawn down, and then I added some wood chips and then a little bit more of the bark mulch. And that way I'm gonna keep those and kind of try and expand that spawn a little bit, so that I can inoculate some of these other pathways over time. So ideally I would have them all inoculated, and maybe not just with King Stropharia, but also you know, maybe other varieties. Maybe you know, bluets are a good one, almond agaricus. These are things that grow on compost. So you know, we have a lot of options. I want to incorporate more mushrooms. We love growing mushrooms. We've grown mushrooms several times in the past. Lots of shiitake logs, lots of you know, we've done King Stropharia, we've done oysters. Mushrooms are also strikingly easy to grow. I'm always shocked at when we put a mushroom, some sort of spawn, either into a log or into wood chips, how readily it does exactly what you expect it to do. So that's something to think about. If mushrooms have intimidated you, don't be intimidated. They're really not scary. It's like any vegetable. It's almost easier than most vegetables because you just get your substrate, that's what they grow on, you get your spawn, we get ours from Field and Forest, and then you follow the instructions and you're good to go. It's, for the most part, has rarely failed us except for when I get idealistic and don't follow the instructions, which happens a lot. And there's also this sort of beautiful tradition with mushrooms and market gardening. Like I have this book you can read, I had to come in the house and get. And then he talks a lot about how the old Parisian French market gardeners used to raise mushrooms under the ground in these like caves. But I always thought that was really cool, and I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool to incorporate more mushrooms into our market farm. You know, a la the French biointensive market gardening system that we sort of follow. But this is one that I think could be really fun. But anyway, this is kind of one of our ideas for making those pathways, you know, not only contribute some financial activity, but also some other things. The other benefit is not just the mushrooms. There's things like micro-remediation that aren't necessarily just for drawing, you know, toxic chemicals out of the soil. That's what we generally associate with micro-remediation. It can also block erosion. I did that video like a few weeks ago, just kind of a little farm tour, and I'll put a little card up there. And you saw a little bit of erosion here and there just from where we'd freshly harrowed a spot, and then it rained 3.5 inches in 24 hours or something, and it washed a little of that away, and it really bothered me. So this is one option for us to actually have a solid mat. The mycelium will take over those wood chips and lock it in place and help to keep, you know, maybe some of that erosion from happening. And also the wood chips and the mulch, it'll act as like a little bit of a sponge. It'll help redistribute water. It'll also act as a mycorrhizal mushroom. This is a mycorrhizal mushroom, which means that it has a symbiotic relationship with the plants. So it'll help to feed them, protect them. It'll do a lot of different things that aren't as easy. You can't as easily put a price tag on them, but it'll do a lot of things like that will contribute to our overall income. So anyway, that's kind of it for now. If you guys like this video, please like this video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you like these kind of videos. If you want to learn more about, you know, our sort of style of farming, which is a variety of different things. We raise animals and we grow vegetables and all these things. So if you want to learn a little bit about that stuff, making a good simple living off good simple living, hit the subscribe button. There's a little bobble that's going to pop up. Yeah, just click on that. That'll take you right to where you need to go. Otherwise, we hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you later. Bye.